Tannehill is sacked. This time Dane Fletcher.
Hey.
This was the first down sack by Fletcher.
Let's see how you do under pressure. Oh. Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me.
Welcome to Fletcher's Unfiltered Podcast, touching on all things fitness, business, and issues in Montana. All right, welcome to episode 10 with Kaelin Gillis, our one and only dietitian here at the Pit. Kaelin, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what I want to dig in on today is a lot of just the tips, tricks, things that you're doing, how you're looking at people, how you're looking at nutrition today. But first and foremost, can you just kind of explain the difference between a dietitian like yourself and a lot of self-proclaimed nutrition coaches out there today?
Yeah, so as a dietitian, I have a lot more extensive training than someone that's considered a nutritionist. We're talking like master's level education with certain training compared to maybe a 3 to 6 month or even weeks long online course. I can also look at prescribing certain nutrients, working with health conditions, and getting a lot more specific. We can look at meal plans and all sorts of things with that, lab values, whereas a nutritionist technically can't or shouldn't be doing that.
Right. And I was, going to MSU. You're an MSU grad as well, athlete, track and field. What we had in the weight room back in the day was a joke. And that kind of drove you into going into the field that you're in today, correct?
Yeah. So as an athlete, as I'm sure you experienced too, like we just had no education on what to do to fuel our bodies when we're training 4 to 6 hours a day, sometimes more. And so got into a place where I really needed to see a dietitian, and luckily had a strength coach that was really on top of that kind of thing. And that's how I learned what a dietitian was halfway through undergrad. And so that motivated me to kind of bring some of that back, especially to Montana, where we're, as athletes, we have maybe the athletic potential to go on to these bigger schools, potentially professional sports for some individuals, and really bring back some of those resources and that information.
That's awesome. I learned a lot. I didn't know anything about nutrition all the way through college. Like, you do your best, and again, you're just looking at Google or Yahoo, whatever it was at the time. But I learned a lot training for the NFL prep in Indianapolis. I was set with a dietitian. She helped me a ton with little tweaks in my diet, and it made the world of difference. I gained a lot of weight in a short amount of time to prepare for our pro day and the combine and whatnot. And then take it a whole nother level, our dietitian with the Patriots, he was with the Navy SEALs, Ted Harper, beforehand. So he looked at a lot of athletes like they're diabetics almost, and really looked at precursors and whatnot for being hypoglycemic and just sustaining insulin levels throughout the day. I thought that was the best information at the time for me there, just in the football setting. And then I come back here and I'm learning a ton under your umbrella as well, just how to approach different seasons, the whys, things like that. So the one thing that I would strongly recommend for people is, if you've never worked with a dietitian, commit, a certain amount of time and everything to 3 months of your life or whatever it is to understand your body and what's right for you. It's not like a lifelong thing, correct?
Yeah, to your point, that's the beauty of being a dietitian versus a nutritionist, is we can get into all of that fine tuning like you did with your dietitian for the combine and with Ted. And so there's a lot more to it than just me maybe telling you to eat fruits and vegetables, which is, I feel like, what the biggest misconception is for people working with a dietitian. And everybody is different. And that's also the beauty of having that conversation, is what's going to work best for you isn't going to be the same for the next person. And so how can we individualize that to you and what your goals are, what your needs are, what your lifestyle and your schedule look like. So I think.
And I feel like a lot of people are like against big pharma right now, understandably, but also, for people to get blood work done is important, I think, for precursors, anything like that. But you to diagnose the blood work also is very important. Say like, hey, you could kind of supplement this in your diet. You can do this and other things than just going the route of just getting on medication.
Yeah, and I look at things like a pyramid. So medications have their place, right? But I think depending on the context and maybe the illness or the medications we're looking at, making sure that all of us have a solid foundation of nutrition, sleep, physical activity, and then start to kind of narrow that pyramid in, and then take into account obviously health conditions in the context of nutrition and fitness, as you guys do as well as strength coaches. But just making sure that we kind of have all of those bases covered and work as a team collaboratively. I know we all do that here at the pit, but then also getting doctor on board, any other medical providers, so that we can really provide a lot better care and a whole picture to what's going on and what people are looking for. That's
what I really like, and I appreciate, I guess, the way you approach being a dietitian as well. And I know probably a lot of dietitians do the same, but it's not just it's a you model. It's not just, it's all about what you eat. You really do encompass everything, how you're training, what you're preparing for, how you should eat on top of it. You talk to doctors. I like the way you approach it just as an outsider.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so can I dig in just on some quick questions so then everybody's getting the most knowledge they can in a shorter podcast today?
Yeah.
Okay, so the difference, and I really don't know a lot of these, so I'm just throwing it up there. The difference between frequent meals or intermittent fasting, which one would you choose?
I would choose frequent meals.
Okay, why?
Frequent meals, you're kind of satisfying those cravings throughout the day. You're giving your body, you talked about insulin levels, so you're giving your body some blood sugar, which is going to be used for energy during the day. And I'm not talking quick things like a soda or candy or anything like that that's really going to spike it and then have it crash later, but looking at more pairing a carbohydrate and a protein together for a snack. And having that be, I guess if you want to call that a frequent meal, but more meals and snacks throughout the day. And two, a lot of people, especially if we're getting into athletic populations, there's a big misconception that we eat too much. And I would say for the most part, when I'm working in that area, a lot of people aren't eating enough. And so having those frequent meals and those frequent snacks helps us to kind of get in what we need during the day to support our training and some of our physical activity goals. And then even from a weight loss standpoint, there's a threshold that we really shouldn't be crossing as far as eating too little. And so that's the big thing I see with people is taking all these things out of their diet. Whereas if we're able to eat more frequent meals or snacks during the day, we're able to satisfy some of those cravings. We're able to kind of get our metabolism back kind of in a more consistent pattern versus kind of being revved up early or late in the day and then kind of being dormant later on. But there are some situations, back to fasting versus not fasting, where maybe an athlete follows Ramadan or has other religious practices or reasons where they may need to follow a fasting diet for a period of time. There's ways to do that. We see in the media different professional athletes that follow this, and I have experience with that in the collegiate setting. And so there are ways to do that. It just gets trickier to be able to meet all of those needs in a shorter window of time. And so that's where I really like to have the conversation of why are we fasting? What are kind of the reasons and motivations behind it to make sure it's something where A, it's feasible, and B, it's something that's not going to be harmful to the athlete or the individual.
Well, and from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you eat, it's telling your body that it's okay to burn fat instead of start burning muscle right away and store fat. And so the first thing I do in the morning is I eat, breakfast, especially before a workout. And a lot of people have different ideas of should I eat before my strength days, but I come in fasted for my cardio days thinking it's burning fat, when that's not necessarily the case, right?
Yeah, you may be burning fat in those fasted workouts, but you're not necessarily able to get through those workouts with the same intensity or power output and go into that getting what you want to out of it if you're fasted. I know you and I have talked about that before, where even you've mentioned noticing going into those fasted workouts versus a fueled workout, you maybe don't have this, you're not getting what you want to out of the workout.
Yeah, I don't have the energy. Yeah. So I'm not burning as much, and I'm not burning muscle throughout the day. I'm not burning fat throughout the day because I didn't tear my muscles up enough, right? As in my opinion, there's really no scientific research that shows we see better performance out of fasted workouts or fasted cardio. There's some out there that talks about some different components of our cells that maybe benefit from it, but they haven't been able to 100% translate that to performance results. Okay. Fasting's not for me. I just tried this 72-hour fast or a 3-day fast. It was pretty miserable. I didn't get a lot out of it, and I guess what I was going for is if there's cancer cells growing and you kind of, hopefully you can kill some of them off. That's just by me Google searching. And I became my own doctor at that point. Probably shouldn't have done that, really, in hindsight. Is there benefits of the different times of fasting? You have your 16/8, you have your 2 days, all that you really paid too much attention to, or you don't pay a lot of attention to fast because it's not that great for you?
I don't work with a lot of fasting unless it's very specific context, like before with the religious practices. Because sometimes when we have that conversation, if it is something that maybe they saw on social media or something like that, we can go through some of the risks versus rewards. And sometimes those are enough to maybe change somebody's mind. Not that I'm trying to dissuade them from everything all the time,
Right.
but if it creates a dangerous or a risky situation, especially multi-day fasting, if I'm working with somebody that's maybe fairly more athletic or is consistently working out, like here at the pit, we would definitely want to look at changing some of their exercise habits during that time. And so it really becomes something where if you are losing weight, it's going to be weight that's probably a lot of water weight and maybe some other, not just fat.
Yeah, that happened to me. I lost muscle, I lost water weight, and I lost muscle. I kind of held on to the fat. So 3 days, yeah, I'm lighter, cool. But the in-body's the true answer to what happened in the last 3 days. And I was like, well, shit, that's not what I wanted.
Right. Yeah. Your body starts to kind of break down some of that muscle tissue to give it energy that you're not feeding it with. And so that's the biggest misconception for people is we hear all these things that are really sexy on social media that are like, do this for this result or XYZ. And kind of like we talked about before, nobody wants to hear necessarily that everybody's different and individualized, but it's true. And so you can't do all of these things and then expect the same results as person A. That's why I hate seeing the celebrities of like what I eat in a day or what I eat to look like this or whatever.
Yeah. All right, to move on. And I'm asking this question because I don't know about it. The prebiotics, probiotics, and what's the third one?
Postbiotics.
Postbiotics. What do each of them do? I know they have their own properties. They have everything that help you in different ways. I hear a lot of, you got to take a lot of prebiotics before surgery, probiotics after surgery, or if you're on antibiotics, you got to bounce back your metabolism and everything like that. Can you go into a little bit of what prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics mean?
Yeah. So I feel like a big trendy thing is the gut microbiome right now and how that affects everything. And so that's comprised of gut bacteria, and probiotics are those good bacteria that we want in our gut.
And what is in a probiotic that you can just eat? Like a Whole Foods, or can you?
Greek yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, different fermented foods like that, miso, tempeh. So fermented foods are going to give you those good probiotics. Usually on the yogurts, you can look and see what the exact strains are. And I think most food products you can now too.
And from what I understand, when you're looking at yogurts, you want Greek yogurt for the most probiotic, correct?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with looking at it in terms of the probiotic, but I do feel like Greek yogurt in general is the most bang for your buck. It's also higher in protein.
Okay.
The process of making it is a lot different. It's lower in sugar or the added sugars to it. But I know I'm thinking of a Chobani, one of the big tubs. You can usually see what the exact strain of the bacteria is that they're putting in it, which sounds gross because we normally don't want bacteria in our food, but we do in the case of probiotics. You can also take it in a capsule form. That would be a supplement. There's different things to just consider with supplements that we can go into later if you want, but probiotics are the bacteria itself. Prebiotics are fibers and things found in our food that feed those probiotics. Yeah. And so we also want prebiotics in our diet. And those could be from asparagus, bananas, different whole grains. That's not exhaustive, but getting a variety of fruits and vegetables and whole grains in your diet helps to feed those probiotics. And then when we're looking at postbiotics, usually you're not looking at supplementing with postbiotics necessarily. Like you wouldn't go to the shelf and see them necessarily as a supplement. And that is the byproduct of that prebiotic feeding the probiotic and what is a result of that interaction. Okay. So we want all of them.
Okay.
And you mentioned surgery or taking antibiotics.
Yep.
And in certain situations like that, we want to make sure that we're doing that for maybe recovery purposes, antibiotics, or obviously trying to kill some of that bacteria or things going on in our body. So we want to replenish that or boost that a little bit afterwards. Different illnesses and different situations are going to maybe warrant a different strain of probiotic. And so that's where working with your doctor or chatting with me or another dietitian could help kind of navigate maybe which one to take.
Cool.
I've told you before I have Crohn's disease, and I take a prebiotic and probiotic that go together that's specific to benefit Crohn's disease. So
cool.
They're relatively safe. As far as supplements go, generically, kind of like a multivitamin, but you just have to be kind of mindful as you take them.
And since we're on the surgery train, is there anything before surgery that people can take supplement wise or food wise that will help them bounce back better post surgery?
Yeah, I would say consuming enough carbohydrates and protein before you go into surgery. So really, like if you've ever done prehab for an orthopedic surgery, kind of doing the same thing with nutrition. So getting your body primed and ready to go, because it can go into such a catabolic state, or that metabolism is really revved up to try and heal your injury, even though it's a positive injury. That's where sometimes we see a lot of weight loss with athletes too, as they're in that like immediate post-surgery window of a few weeks. And that's because that metabolism just gets so high trying to repair itself. And so making sure going into surgery, you've got good amino acid profile, which is our proteins, and then doing something like a Gatorade or a carbohydrate drink like immediately before you have to stop eating is also going to be helpful, because you have that window of time where you're not consuming any food so that you're safer during surgery.
Cool. I also was told before AMI surgeries, I've had a lot of them, like vitamin D, possibly calcium beforehand and post-surgery as well, helps with everything. Is that true?
Absolutely. And that's where we are looking at, like the vitamin D and calcium you mentioned are really big components to bone health. And so if we're having orthopedic surgery where we're cutting bones, that's where we really want to look at those. Sometimes doctors will also have you get labs done where we can look at that and see maybe if we need to go higher in one than the other, or maybe we're already deficient in one, so we need to boost that a little bit. But a good orthopedic team is also going to be able to kind of work with your dietitian to be able to navigate that.
Okay. Processed foods. What are your feelings on processed foods? Is it worth it? Like when I go to Jersey Mike's and I get the sandwich, are you totally against me going to Jersey Mike's? And then I kind of want to dive more into, when you go to the grocery store and you see all these organic labels, and there's a ton of different organic labels out there now. What do you look for? Do you go to the organic sections, whether it's fruits, vegetables, and meats, or can you get away from that? I don't know enough about it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's all really misleading, so that doesn't help us either.
Correct.
So as far as like processed foods versus unprocessed foods, technically if we're even shredding carrots, that makes it a processed food. So I think we're probably talking about things that are more like factory made, crackers, cookies, the things that we buy on the shelf that are really snacky or gimmicky, right?
Yeah. Or processed meats, like sliced deli meats.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, deli ham, all of that stuff. And I think really when we're looking at my big thing going to the store, even for myself, is just looking at the ingredients list. It's not, we always hear you should be able to pronounce everything on there, but we see things listed as ingredients like thiamine or riboflavin and all these things that sound really weird, but those are both B vitamins. And so we want those in our diet, but when we read those, sometimes we don't know necessarily that that's what it is. But my thing is looking, like if we're looking at crackers, the biggest thing or the first thing in the ingredients list should be something like a whole wheat or an oat or something that's a whole grain. And then trying to see maybe out of the ones that we like, which one has the least amount of ingredients. And so I'm looking for things that we consider maybe not as processed, I think, for most of us. And sometimes those are the organic options, sometimes they're not. And so if I'm looking at produce, if it's something, especially where I'm gonna eat the peel, then I probably wanna maybe go organic, because I'm still gonna wash it, but I'm still gonna eat the skin. Like if you're gonna zest a lemon or something like that.
Yeah.
For the most part, I personally don't necessarily go only organic or only conventional. I kind of look at like what I'm searching for as far as ingredients. Like I mentioned with the peel, I even see it with different like milk products or plant-based milks. A lot of times the organic option has the least amount of stuff in it.
Okay.
And so sometimes that makes it better. If we're looking at cost, yes, organic is usually a little bit more expensive. But there's ways, if you feel really passionate about that, there's ways to do it on the cheaper end, which is looking for things like frozen products, and some of the different things that are on sale. I would say, though, the biggest caveat with all of this is if that is the barrier to you eating fruits and vegetables, then eat conventional fruits and vegetables. Don't feel like don't make the organic thing kind of like the have to do it. If you just need to get in more fruits and vegetables during the day, just focus on that. Don't worry about organic.
What about meats, though? Because when I go to if you go to Albertsons and I see their steak, and their steak, and then I don't even know if they have an organic section. Maybe they probably do. But when I see their steak in Albertsons, and I go to like Primal, right, or Daniel's, but mainly Primal, they got such good cuts. And I'm going to give Cam a shout out here for Primal because the cuts are phenomenal, but it's so colorful. You know that that's a really clean steak. What's the difference in that? And is the nutrition value of paying for good meat worth it? Because I do all day. I know my family does all day, but is it worth it?
Yeah, from a science standpoint, because I 100% support beef. We live in rural Montana, and so we have more cows than neighbors, which is great.
Yeah.
But there isn't a huge difference in terms of bioavailability of some of those nutrients. Grass-fed beef tends to lean a little bit higher on omega-3s compared to omega-6s, whereas traditional commercial beef maybe is a little bit higher in omega-6s relative to omega-3s. But there hasn't been a ton of literature out there on the way, like if it's a significant difference when we eat it.
Okay.
There's a big difference in taste. You probably noticed that.
Yeah.
And I think too, being in Montana specifically, we're really fortunate enough to have good access to quality meat, whether it's beef, whether it's hunting, whether it's pork or any other sort of meat that you can raise. And so I would recommend eating local also. And I didn't mention this with fruits and vegetables, but I think eating local to prioritizing that even as a first step over organic versus not organic is another big one for people. Because I'm sure Daniel's or Primal has a lot of great local options as well. I know different grocery stores here in town also offer different local meat cuts, and they're usually not too much more expensive than
Just got to go that route.
Yeah. And I'm, as someone that like works out and hunts and hikes and all of that, there's nothing I love more than running into a cow out on National Forest Service land, because a lot of times that cow has been grass fed, which is really trendy right now, for most of its life. And so we really get lost in kind of some of the semantics of how we get our food.
Speaking of labels, you got, cage chickens, you got all these different labels, you got grass fed. Is there one or two labels that you look for more than others? Because when I go to a grocery store, which I really don't go to the grocery store too often, but it seems like a lot, and I don't know what to pick even in the organic section.
Yeah, and that's where it's so tricky, and that's what I meant before too about being misleading as far as our food products and packaging go, is some of them have strict guidelines as far as what they can say on a package, and some of them don't. And so like USDA certified organic has very specific criteria that it has to meet. If you see something that says organic ingredients or made with organic ingredients, it has to have, I believe, X amount of that product made with organic ingredients. When we get into things like the free range and the cage free and some of that other stuff, even gluten-free certifications, there isn't a universal gluten-free certification. Each one has different like parts per million thresholds. And so it gets very messy as far as like a true definition of what that means. So they might be cage free or free roaming, but they might be fed a certain diet that maybe the feed isn't as high of a quality as other chickens or eggs, chicken eggs you can see.
Yeah,
out
they
there.
might be in like a cage, but they're eating Frosted Flakes.
Yeah. And so
you're
it's
free range, but they're eating like the corn that I'm just disposing of.
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it's just, that's where I think, not that all of us are able to do this, and I'm not trying to tell everybody that this is the end all be all, but the benefit of having local options, especially if you go to the grocery store, I feel way more comfortable buying local eggs where I can look up where the farm is in Manhattan or wherever it may be, so that I can kind of know, A, it's great to know where your food comes from, and B, just knowing kind of how they raise their chickens. Then you have that connection where you can email them and ask if you feel passionate about that. And if you're ever curious about food labeling, I recommend looking it up, because there's so many random ones out there. Or if we get into certain things that make health claims, like we all see that Cheerios says it can lower cholesterol. The reason they can say that is because it has X amount of fiber in it, or soluble fiber. And so some of them are tied to a specific micronutrient. Like for something to say low sodium, I believe it has to have 140 milligrams of sodium or less per serving. And so some of them are tied to very specific things, and then others are just a free-for-all.
Okay. I want to get into a couple tips that you can give people in two different categories. One is weight gain and one is weight loss. You have people that I actually was confused when I first opened the gym. I thought everybody for the most part wanted to do weight loss. There's a significant amount of men and women in here that have an issue gaining weight. And so not only are the football players out of high school and middle school and in college trying to gain weight, but I'm learning a lot more adults are trying to gain weight. So could you just give a few tips, tricks, or just advice on gaining weight for people in a healthy manner?
Yeah, one would be to start thinking about things as calorically dense versus nutrient dense. Not that I'm saying avoid fruits and vegetables, but what are ways that you can incorporate still normal food products that maybe are more bang for your buck as far as calories go? Because eating 3 energy bites made of peanut butter and oats and all of that stuff is going to be way more appealing than eating a giant salad that has lettuce and meat and eggs and all of the things on it to give you the same caloric intake. And so if we're able to do things like nut butters or seed butters or trail mix and just the nuts and seeds themselves, looking at switching, if you're drinking milk, switching to whole milk, and just different strategies like that to try and boost intake while you're still eating the same things that you like to eat, I would say is a really big one. The other thing is smoothies are going to be your best friend if you're really struggling with that, because you can put whatever you want in a smoothie.
Yeah.
You can do fruit, you can do the whole milk or regular milk. You can do things, I know this sounds kind of weird, but avocado in your smoothie, you can't really taste it. And it gives you the extra calorie from the healthy fats. And then it also gives that really creamy and rich kind of mouthfeel and texture to it. Others would be Greek yogurt, adding peanut butter. I know Caleb, when he was trying to gain weight, would always put oats in his smoothie too. Yeah. And so just trying to find ways to pump it up with things that you maybe wouldn't do otherwise. But then it's in liquid form, so our bodies tolerate it a lot more versus like I mentioned, something that's just like an obscene volume of food at once.
That's what's cool about working with a dietitian when I was playing in the league with Ted. Is I would just go to him and be like, okay, I put all this in it. Can you dissect what I put in it? You know, I'd put oats, I'd put hands full of spinach in there, Greek yogurt, whatever it made, protein. I'd always put a scoop of protein. Now, I kind of pinned my body on what it needs in the NFL. And that's at 6,000 calories, what I needed then to maintain 250 pounds. Or whatever. So now I do the same shake every morning because I know it's right for my body. But I just cut out a lot of the oats. I cut down on the oats. I'm not trying to gain weight like they were. And that's what's cool about just kind of dialing in what's right for you and meeting with a dietitian. If I had any advice in the world, it would be to meet with a dietitian at least once in your life and figure out what is correct for you, because that information carries on the rest of your life. And then you just fine tune it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, we can change things up in our smoothie depending on maybe the season of life or just the season. Like if you're an athlete training for something, are you in an off season? Are you getting close to an event? We have the rut coming up. So what are we doing to kind of help with that as well? And I know that's not necessarily weight gain, but the same concept kind of applies.
Yeah. How I prepare, and I'm just going off of me, but how I prepare for bow hunting season now is completely different than when I go out and I'm packing in for snowmobiling, or even like as silly as a hockey game, or, you know, everything's so different. And I'm just lucky to be around a team that, I can just bounce ideas off of. And I want to ask you, after you hit the weight loss category or tips, kind of what you do, especially gearing up for bow season with you and Caleb. But can we dig in on did we hit everything on the three, on some of the tips for weight gain?
The last one I was going to say is get a cooler or a lunchbox, because if you're, especially depending on what you're training for, I know Caleb can speak to it and you can probably speak to it, but depending on the situation, it can be awful to try and gain some weight with as much food as you would want to be consuming, to do it from a healthy standpoint and not just eat a large pizza every night to yourself for dinner.
I hated it.
Yeah. And
I hated it.
Getting used to just carrying things around, being that person that packs a lunchbox or a cooler across campus or to work or whatever the case may be, because it's going to be a burden and you're going to be missing out on those opportunities to actually gain the weight if you're not eating the food.
And there's a proper way to gain weight. Like what I was taught in college, especially my freshman year, is the seafood diet. Seafood, you eat it, but that's to your point. Like you can't just eat all this pizza and garbage. Like you have to have a certain balance to it where you're gaining the proper weight at the time and everything like that. Like, don't do the seafood diet, please, high school kids. Like, too many kids are still doing that. Too many kids are still on like the Jay Cutler diet right now that I was on in high school. explain. It really doesn't work that well compared to the knowledge that you have now. So it's worth your bang for your buck 100%. It'll save you a lot of time and energy to Google everything that you need to do. Just go meet with somebody, if not you, meet with somebody like you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, 3 tips, lose weight, or just some tips, what you see, how you can help people lose weight in the nutrition side.
Yeah, I would say my biggest 3, and I'll explain them too, but would be eat food. Don't just cut everything out. Don't follow a fad diet and all of the other gimmicky things that are out there, or take a supplement just to do that. Like those like fat burning things and that kind of stuff. And then also start to learn your body. I feel like we lose a lot of that, and I'll maybe explain that one first, but we get into these habits and these behaviors, and I'm guilty of it too, where like maybe I'm at home and I just like want something to do with my hands. And so sometimes that's making a bowl of popcorn or something where I can just like easily snack out of boredom or something along those lines. And so really starting to learn or get back to learning what physical hunger is, because we are born with that and we just kind of lose it as time goes on. Some people more than others, I would say, but figuring that out, what physical hunger is, what kind of behaviors maybe you have around food. Like there's a big psychological component too, to also being able to finish your whole plate or like finishing that like whole bag of chips. And so being able to maybe think of different strategies, and that's where I try to be helpful too, is with those strategies of maybe like looking at a smaller plate. And so you can still fill your plate and finish that plate and have the satisfaction of being able to eat the whole thing, or a smaller bag of chips at lunch or something like that, where you can finish that whole snack size and still get that satisfaction to it. Whereas then you like don't even realize that you're probably eating less, but you actually are. And then getting back to the actually eating food and the fad diets and stuff, I think the biggest misconception that people have when we're talking about weight loss and that sort of thing is everybody wants to maybe lose weight to look good for the summer or this or that. But that's not something that you just want to do for a few weeks, right? If you're really trying to work on your health journey or feel good about how you're feeling with your body and being able to do all the things you want to do, that's going to take time. And so really trying to avoid those crash diets, because that's short-term weight loss, and really just trying to kind of think about what those habits are that you can maintain that long-term. No one likes to think about nutrition. I don't want to think about how much protein is on my plate when I eat dinner. And so trying to just recognize those habits and those patterns, and maybe we do look at how much is on your plate initially, just to kind of get an idea and a picture of that. But then we tailor and fine tune things to you and like your training status or whatever your fitness level may be or your activities. And then we create those sustainable habits so that you are able to be comfortable in your body or maintain that weight that you desire long term. But also getting into like what actually is a healthy weight and what that means. Because I would say that that is more of the motivation for people, is just wanting to look and feel comfortable in their body and do all the things they want to do versus the actual number on the scale. Yeah. And so that's a big conversation that we have. And then, like I said, just making it last. And those crash diets are great. You usually lose weight right away. But then when you stop the diet and are sick of having to follow something super specific, miss out on things with your kids, miss out on barbecues, social events, that kind of stuff, then you revert back to the habits that you had before. And then we kind of get back into the same situation.
People drive me nuts on these diets.
I know, that's why social media is
every barbecue,
horrible.
like you say, you go every family outing or whatever, and now so-and-so's on a fucking diet and they can't eat the corn that's there, or they can't eat this. And it's annoying to me just being around where I'm at. And it's like, okay, you can't eat anything. You're here and you're like, and it's always on vacation or something where it's like, this is the time where you do eat. This is the time where you actually don't have to work out as hard as you usually do, or at all. Like, it's not where you're going to, but now like people all of a sudden go on a vacation. They're like, no, we hike every day. No, I don't eat. And I'm like, enjoy life. Like just do that do that kind of mindset at home more, like cut out some things that are important. And I think that's what's cool about your app is you have to track what you're eating. And I think if people just tracked how much they work out, like they have to here, or like they can do here, and what they're eating, and then you see it, another person seeing what you're eating, it would shock you how much you're putting in your body, or how least amount of food you're putting in your body, probably more so. Like you're starving yourself, and that's turning into fat and whatever it may be, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes I'll use it. I try to gauge just what's going to work best for the person, because I view it too as my job to kind of take on those macronutrients, because I don't want to get us into a rabbit hole either that we do it every day. But it is a really good tool for people to kind of see what they are actually consuming in a day or not consuming, to your point too. And so then just kind of checking in on that every once in a while as we work on those changes, because we don't want to be tracking every single meal. Just like we also don't want to be working with a dietitian for every day of our life for the rest of our life. And so how do we kind of maybe start with those habits initially and tailor those into things that we can sustain long term, whether it's weight loss or like we talked about before with weight gain, and then learning those patterns and those habits as season of life changes. But yeah, it gets really misleading when we're seeing all of the different things that are out there.
I think that's important for people, like what you just said. I think it's important for people to know, because I think a lot of our members know that. A lot of our business owners or moms or dads, they got life going on. They don't necessarily want to go and track their macros and even try and learn how to and go about it. And, you know, you get a Chipotle bowl and now they're like, oh, I got to blah, blah, blah. Like, cool part about what you do is you'll track it for them, and then you'll see kind of how the scales slide and where things are going over a certain period of time. And then you can just help them, be like, well, just supplement this and this, and just tell them what they need. And then once you have a grasp on what is right for your body, boom, you're good for the rest of your life, basically. And then you have some hormonal changes, whether it's menopause or things like that. And then your job really kicks in even more in helping people out, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of look at it as like phases. So there's athletes that I work with that maybe we meet once and we come up with a plan that supports them and their season or something like that. And then maybe they have specific goals that they have to meet in the off season or before the next season. So obviously during the season is probably not the time to work on those things. We want to be able to maintain and do what we need to do for the season itself. And so then maybe we meet again later. Not everybody is somebody that maybe needs to meet all the time or super frequently, but then you have that connection, or like as things come up, you have the knowledge to kind of translate a lot of that for yourself. And then as things change, you can be like, hey, Cailyn, this has come up, or I'm starting to go through menopause or perimenopause and I'm noticing some changes. Like, do you have any tips? And so it's something that really can just kind of follow with you long term, like you said. And it's not that you're relying on somebody for everything every day, but just having that resource available to even ask questions.
Yeah. Last question for you. You and Caleb are bow hunters. You're gearing up for bow hunting season this fall, I assume, correct?
Yeah.
What are some things, Cailyn, that you are preparing for meal prep, things like that, to be able to pack in on some of these hunts?
Yeah. Just like everything else, it depends. We both have archery antelope tags. And so hunting in 100-degree heat where it's maybe a little bit more flat and less mountainous compared to elk season where you might have, especially late rifle season, where you might have snow on the ground and be up in the mountains hiking all over the hills, is going to be quite different. And so archery antelope, I've got a lot more electrolyte solutions, and depending if I'm sitting in a blind versus out doing a spot and stock. And so making sure that I always have the hydration with electrolytes, enough water too. I feel like that's a big one that we're all probably guilty of forgetting or not having enough of. And then too, once we get into elk season, I like to always keep kind of an emergency bag of snacks in my pack too. So strategically planning breakfast, lunch, dinner to be things that are quick and easy. Breakfast, we usually do oatmeal with a little bit, maybe we'll bring like a protein powder or something light to put with it to make it more substantial. But then having snacks that are carbohydrates and proteins together. So whether that's trail mix or granola bars, things that are easy to pack. Trail mix is flexible. You can make your own, which is really nice. And then too, having that emergency bag of food where maybe we hike in 3 miles, see a big bull, go after it. Maybe we're successful. And then now you've gone after it in addition to your 3 miles, and you have to pack 170 pounds of meat back to camp. Yeah. So how do you kind of plan for that? I just keep an emergency bag of food that has some of those carb and protein snacks, but also some quick energy things, whether it's those applesauce pouches, or you can get those sport chews or different things like that, fruit snacks, just so that if I am in a situation where I have kind of depleted myself and you start to get those low blood sugar feelings, I can have something real quick so that I'm not letting those feelings or that physical impact of it dictate like what's going to happen with my shot, or I can reduce that to some extent, just like you would for sport, right? If you're not fueling, you see those cognitive decreases kind of come about eventually. And so we want to avoid the same thing when we're in those critical moments.
Yeah, I am 100% going to be more cognizant this year, because last year I lost like 12, like I lost too much weight, you know, because I'm like a Labrador going after a duck, you know, and it's just, I just want to get it. I just want to get it. And I forget about food. I forget about snacks.
Yeah.
And then like, I'll get done after a couple of days of hunting. I'm like, I have nothing in my system right now. Instead, like there's some things to be cognizant of. I know like before I work out and after I work out to pair with my proteins, because that's important to have something, a carbohydrate to supplement with protein. I know this year going into bow season, I'm going to pack our first form ignition, like in a lot. I never did that last year, but I'm going to do that on top of like our protein bars. And, you know, I need a lot of stuff. So I'm going to be meeting with you, but it's important to plan for this, you know, cause I lived off of a couple Jet Boil meals and that's about it. And then, you know, but like you said, like you shoot a bull, you got to wait out that bull. And then you got to pack it. Like I was not prepared enough, and I'd get it done, but then I'm that much more depleted when I'm done. Just prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easier said than done. Like I feel like most of us don't necessarily go into hunting treating it like a sport. Training fitness wise for it has become a lot more popular, which is great, but I still don't really see the catch up with the nutrition component to it also. And I know that like even just seeing what like friends, if we are hunting with friends or just seeing what other people pack for that kind of stuff is always really interesting, because Caleb is very much like, I'm going to leave it to you to take care of all of the snacks and the food and just like tell me what we're packing kind of thing. Whereas other friends like take all this like random stuff, and it's like not a bad thing necessarily, because hunting is too where we're have a lot of traditions and like family values and that kind of thing also. And, but it's just interesting to me to see what other people pack when we're not thinking about it like that. I guess.
And like I was in the sauna yesterday, I was up hiking this weekend, and I'm just heavy right now. I'm too heavy. And I've been preparing for this. Like I've actually on purpose I'm preparing to be heavy right now, and I got to cut weight. I'm almost treating it like a football season, which is cool. I enjoy that process. But right now I got to cut, you know, and I was heavy this week, and I was like, hey, well, this is the week where I start cutting. So we were in the sauna yesterday. Like, how are you know, people are asking me like, how are you going to cut and everything like that. I was like, well, I'm just going to starve myself for 2 weeks, which is a lie. No, but I was like, you know, every meal, I'm not going to slow down the amount of meals, because I know how important that is. I need consistent meals throughout the day. I'm just going to probably cut those, especially the carbs in it, like in half, and just do things differently on that end. And I know just because I've been doing this long enough, I'll do it, you know, and I'll probably cut 8 pounds in the next couple, 2-3 weeks, and I'll feel good going into the fall. It's just mind over matter at that point. Is that a good way to go about it? Just cut down on what is in your meal as opposed to the amount of meals.
Yeah. If we're looking at like specific cutting strategies, I always like think of wrestlers and stuff too, where body composition is critical, but looking at the carbohydrate component to your meals, we want to make sure that we're doing enough carbs to fuel your training. And this is the approach I use with everyone. But carbs to fuel your training, adequate protein to build and maintain that muscle mass.
Okay.
And then I always kind of say veggies are unlimited because they're so low in total calories and give us so many benefits from the micronutrients. And then fruit, I kind of lump into the carbohydrates. But we store carbohydrates with water in our tissue too. And so that's where cutting out some of those carbohydrates, we can see some of that body water loss initially as well. And so as we aren't storing those, we're not storing that water. And so we need to stay on top of hydration.
Yeah. Last thing, I know that said that was last thing before that, but the true last thing is I see what you're doing with some of the groups here in the gym and some of these groups of ladies and guys, and you're kind of combining people in as a group, take them to the grocery store, teach them what to eat. Do you have anything coming up this fall where to look forward to, or that people can jump in here at the gym and, you know, meet with you and I like the community side, how you're doing it of just, you know, you can meet specifically with you, or you can kind of go as this group approach and it's a little less expensive and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, all of us usually have similar questions, right? And so if one person doesn't think of it and later is like, oh, I wish I would have asked that, the more people we have in the group, the more we can cover that's relevant to everyone. And two, like be able to have that community aspect to it, because we all eat. And so that's a huge component of our life. So it's fun to have that to do with other people. But I think like this fall, we're going to do a group class again. We just finished our first group class ever. And then we did go to the grocery store. I think that's super helpful to do with people, is going to the store, seeing what you like to eat. I'm not the food police. So going through what the ingredients list looks like, how to read a label, what fiber means. A great question I got this last run was net carbs. What does that mean? We always see that on everything or on food packages. And so how to kind of navigate some of that stuff when it applies to certain situations during the day compared to others. We're also looking at having, I think we're going to do it towards the end of September, but a Saturday session that's open to the public. We were going to look at maybe polling on Instagram what topic we want to cover, but we've also talked about doing something hunting specific, kind of prepping for that, postpartum, and then also looking at menopause and having different groups and kind of support for specific things.
And I think it's cool because we asked you, do you want to just do it with just our members or do you want to just do it with open to the public? I think open to public, let anybody come and learn, and it's free just to be a part of what you got going on and the knowledge that you help people with. And that's the end all be all, is just to help anybody and everybody in their fitness journey.
Yeah. Well, and like we talked about today, there's so many like different nuances to it and specifics that you could get into that if I didn't have the background that I do in it or the desire to like read up on that stuff, I kind of nerd out on it, but like not everybody has that. So that's what I'm here for.
Cool. We're going to have a lot more of these with you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.